Take all the time you need, I told my wife while she rolled a white suitcase toward the front door like she was boarding a better life. Claire smiled at me with the same careful expression she'd been using for months. Soft voice, controlled eyes, phone always face down. She kissed my cheek, fingers cold from gripping the suitcase handle, then said she needed a week to clear her head. Funny thing about marriage after 14 years. You stop hearing words. You start tracking patterns. The sudden gym memberships. The password changes. The late Thursday marketing dinners charged to a corporate card that suddenly showed up on our joint tax filings. 3 months earlier, I hired a forensic accountant after spotting a transfer buried inside our checking statements. $6,400 routed into a boutique travel agency in Miami under a shell payment code labeled consulting expenses. Claire assumed I skimmed statements like every exhausted husband in suburban America. She forgot I built my construction company auditing contracts line by line because one missed decimal could burn $250,000. Numbers talk. Affairs leave fingerprints. Her Uber notification flashed across the kitchen island before she grabbed her phone. Black Escalade. Driver arriving in 2 minutes. Destination hidden. She moved fast after that. Too fast. That urgency carried guilt all over it. I leaned against the counter, coffee cooling in my hand, and watched her check herself in the hallway mirror one last time. New gold necklace. Fresh manicure. Carry-on pack for 7 days, even though she claimed she needed space to think. Nobody packs lace dresses and designer heels to think. I'll call you when I land, she said. I nodded once. Sounds good. Calm voice. Steady breathing. Same tone I used while closing hostile contract negotiations. She studied my face for cracks. Women like Claire always expect emotion. Anger gives them control. Silence terrifies them because silence hides preparation. The front door closed. Her heels clicked across the driveway. Then the engine pulled away. I counted to 5 before setting my coffee down and walking straight into my office. A black folder sat inside my desk drawer under property tax records and payroll files. Claire. White capital letters across the tab. Inside sat hotel receipts, screenshots, geotagged photos, copies of deleted iCloud backups, and a timeline organized tighter than a federal audit. Ryan Mercer entered the timeline 6 months earlier. Senior Sales Director. 42. Recently divorced. Gym addict with veneered teeth and a habit of liking bikini photos at 2 in the morning. Men like Ryan always mistake access for power. Claire met him during a leadership retreat in Scottsdale. 4 days later, she opened a private checking account with First Horizon Bank and redirected small amounts of money into it every Friday afternoon. 400 here, 700 there. Careful enough to dodge casual attention. Sloppy enough to trigger mine. I opened my laptop and logged into the remote security server tied to our home network. Camera feeds filled the screen. Empty kitchen. Empty hallway. Empty driveway. Then I clicked another tab. Claire's old iPad backup synced automatically through our shared family cloud plan because she never disabled the legacy permissions after upgrading devices. Most people think betrayal explodes in one moment. Truth works slower. Truth drips through wires, receipts, metadata, timestamps, and hidden charges until the entire marriage smells rotten. I opened the newest sync file. 3 unread messages loaded onto the screen from Ryan Mercer. The latest one arrived 37 seconds earlier. Can't wait to finally have you for a whole week. I stared at the message a while, then smiled for the first time in months because Ryan Mercer had just made a mistake neither of them understood yet. He sent that text to the wrong device. I spent the next 40 minutes building a timeline tight enough to survive court. Every screenshot received a timestamp label. Every bank transfer got exported into a separate encrypted folder. Claire treated secrecy like a game, but people in affairs always grow sloppy once excitement replaces caution. Ryan Mercer especially. Men like him chase validation harder than women. I opened his social media accounts through a private browser and started cross-referencing dates against Claire's transaction history. Hotel rooftop in Miami posted Friday night. Claire's American Express statement showed a $783 dinner charge 12 minutes earlier. Boat photo Saturday afternoon. Marina charge appeared under Ryan's corporate reimbursement records through Atlas Media Link, the company where Claire worked. I already knew enough for divorce court. What interested me now was leverage. Divorce turns ugly when shame enters the room. I called my attorney at 9:12 sharp. Susan Keller answered on the second ring. You finally ready? She asked. I want containment, I said. Asset protection first. Emotional fallout second. That answer made her pause because most betrayed spouses chase revenge before strategy. I built my company surviving lawsuits from suppliers, labor disputes, and zoning boards. Emotion clouds leverage. Leverage wins. Susan pulled up our file while I logged into the shared investment accounts Claire barely understood. Years earlier, my accountant structured the business through layered holding companies after a subcontractor tried suing me over a collapsed retaining wall project. Claire always mocked the paperwork, called it paranoid rich guy nonsense. That nonsense now separated my operating capital from marital exposure. Susan reviewed the trust structure while I transferred $380,000 into a protected business reserve authorized under existing corporate bylaws. Clean. Legal. Traceable. She touched any business accounts lately? Susan asked. Small withdrawals. Hidden checking account. Travel spending. Keep documenting. Judges love patterns. I leaned back in my chair and opened another synced message thread from Claire's tablet backup. Hundreds of texts loaded instantly. Ryan wrote like every middle-aged man trying to sound younger than his cholesterol levels. Cocky jokes. Vacation selfies. Cheap confidence wrapped in expensive restaurants. Claire answered differently with him. Lighter. Hungrier. Like she resurrected some college version of herself she thought marriage buried alive. One message stopped me cold. Claire, he still thinks I am confused about us. Ryan, you already checked out months ago. Claire, I just need the timing right. Ethan watches everything. I read that line 3 times. Watches everything. She knew. Somewhere deep down, Claire sensed pressure building around her. That explained the sudden affection during the last 2 weeks. The random shoulder touches. The fake concern. The extra questions about my schedule. Betrayal changes people into amateur intelligence officers. Every conversation becomes surveillance. Every smile becomes reconnaissance. I forwarded the entire thread to Susan using a secure encrypted transfer link. Then I opened the smart home system tied to our property. Garage access logs. Security codes. Device history. 3 months earlier, Claire created a temporary guest code active every Thursday between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. Ryan Mercer's Tesla entered our gated neighborhood 7 separate times while I attended commercial development meetings downtown. My jaw tightened harder than it had all morning. Affairs inside hotels feel disgusting. Affairs inside your home feel surgical. Suddenly, the missing bottle of 18-year bourbon made sense. The broken guest room lamp. The security camera facing the backyard that mysteriously lost connection for 4 hours in April. Claire thought she covered tracks. She forgot I owned the server rack storing every disconnected frame. I restored the deleted footage manually and watched the loading bar crawl across my screen until a frozen image finally appeared. Then my phone buzzed with a new message from Claire. A beach selfie. White sunglasses. Forced smile. Caption underneath. I finally feel like I can breathe again. 1 second later, another notification appeared beneath hers. Unknown number. Area code Miami. The message contained 1 sentence only. Your wife just checked into my hotel with another man. You deserve the truth. I stared at the anonymous message for almost a minute before answering. Most people picture betrayal like shattered glass and screaming matches. Real betrayal arrives cleaner than that. Quiet. Precise. A stranger sends 1 sentence, and suddenly your marriage turns into evidence. I typed back 3 words. Who is this? The response came instantly. Front desk manager. Your wife left her tablet charger downstairs. Ryan Mercer asked me to bring it to room 1814. My jaw locked hard enough to ache. Room number. Full name. Direct confirmation. Claire spent months building lies while a hotel employee tore them apart in 11 seconds. I called the number immediately. A man answered in a low professional voice. Sir, I probably should not have texted you, he said. But my father lost everything in a divorce like this. Your wife introduced Mr. Mercer as her husband at check-in. That sentence hit harder than the affair itself. Husband. People reveal their real intentions through small performances. Claire no longer treated me like an obstacle. She replaced me in her mind weeks ago. I thanked him calmly and ended the call. Then I opened my legal notes and added another line under documented intent, representing a fair partner as spouse during active marriage. Courts care about financial deception more than broken hearts. I already knew where this headed. What mattered now was control over the landing. I pulled up the deed to our house and reviewed the renovation invoices from 3 years earlier. My company funded 80% of the remodel through business distributions protected before marriage under a separate inheritance clause from my father's estate. Claire skimmed those documents during signing day beside a catered lunch and designer pens. She trusted charm more than paperwork. Huge mistake. Susan called back around noon after reviewing the message archive. Ryan Mercer used company funds for several trips, she said. That creates exposure for him too. Meaning his employer might care about expense fraud involving a senior executive and a married subordinate. I leaned back slowly. There it was. The first shift in leverage. Affairs thrive in secrecy. Exposure poisons them. Susan continued speaking while I opened Atlas Media Link's executive board directory online. Ryan Mercer sat on 3 advisory committees tied to ethics, compliance, and corporate conduct. Perfect. Men who build careers preaching. Integrity usually collapses fastest once hypocrisy enters public records. Keep pressure legal, Susan warned. Judges reward restraint. I am way past emotional reactions, I answered. Good, she said, because Claire still thinks she controls the timing. After the call, I opened the restored security footage from April. Grainy backyard camera feed flickered onto the screen. Timestamp. Thursday, 2:13 p.m. Ryan stepped through my patio door, carrying a bottle of bourbon from my own cabinet like he belonged there. Claire followed behind him, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. That image twisted something deep in my chest. Affairs always carry theft inside them. Time stolen. Trust stolen. Familiarity stolen. Ryan laughed at something off camera while Claire touched his arm and glanced toward the disconnected security camera above the garage. She knew exactly what she was hiding. Then another detail surfaced that changed the entire equation. Ryan reached into his jacket and handed Claire a thick, white envelope. She opened it immediately. Cash. A large amount. Claire counted the bills fast, nervous eyes scanning the room while Ryan spoke. My pulse slowed instead of rising. Fear leaves patterns. Cash changes everything. People use cash when they expect records to matter later. I paused the footage, zoomed tighter, and caught the corner of the envelope clearly enough to read a printed logo stamped across the front. Atlas Media Link Executive Compensation Division. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the hotel manager. This time he attached a photograph. Claire and Ryan stood beside the resort pool, smiling at the camera while Ryan held a champagne glass in one hand, and my wife wore the diamond bracelet I bought her on our 10th anniversary. But that was not the part that froze me. The part that froze me sat in the background of the image. A man in a navy blazer stared directly into the camera from 20 feet away. I recognized him instantly because 3 months earlier I paid him $5,000 to follow my wife. The photograph changed the temperature of the entire situation. I zoomed in tighter until the pixels sharpened. Around the man near the pool. Navy blazer. Gray hair, trimmed military short. Aviator sunglasses. Dean Holloway. Former federal investigator turned private intelligence contractor. 3 months earlier, I hired him after Claire started treating our marriage like a negotiation she had already won. Dean specialized in financial tracing, digital recovery, and behavioral surveillance for high-asset divorces. Expensive guy, worth every cent. The strange part was this. Dean never mentioned traveling to Miami. I picked up the phone immediately. He answered before the second ring. You saw the photo, he said. Calm voice. No surprise. Why are you standing 20 feet from my wife? I asked. Because your situation got bigger yesterday morning. That answer landed heavy. I closed my office door and sat down slowly while Dean lowered his voice. Ryan Mercer pulled money from an executive retention fund through Atlas Media Link. Large amounts. Structured withdrawals under consulting reimbursements. I started tracking the transfers after your accountant flagged overlap with Claire's private account. I rubbed my jaw while pulling up the spreadsheet from earlier. Cash envelope. Executive compensation logo. The puzzle pieces finally started locking together. How much money? I asked. Over 200 grand across 7 months. My eyes narrowed. Affairs cost money. Covering one up costs more. Ryan paying her? Dean paused. Looks more complicated than that. He sent a secure file transfer while we stayed on the call. I opened it instantly. Hundreds of pages. Expense reports. Corporate travel records. Internal audit summaries. One section carried red flags all over it. Atlas Media Link launched a quiet internal fraud review 6 weeks earlier after irregular executive reimbursements surfaced through offshore vendor accounts. Ryan Mercer sat directly in the middle of the investigation. Claire's name appeared beside his 14 separate times. Suddenly, her behavior during the last 2 months made perfect sense. The nervous energy, the sudden push for space, the emotional distance. She was preparing escape routes while Ryan fought corporate exposure behind closed doors. Your wife may think she is running toward freedom, Dean said carefully. Truth looks uglier. She tied herself to a man circling a financial collapse. I leaned back in silence while reading through transaction logs. Cayman vendor payments, fake consulting contracts, bonus diversions disguised as marketing development expenses. Ryan skimmed corporate money through shell entities and moved portions into personal accounts connected to Claire. Small enough to avoid immediate detection, large enough to trigger federal scrutiny once auditors followed the chain. Claire knows, I asked. Enough to panic, Dean answered. Yesterday, she searched criminal defense attorneys in Miami using the Resort Business Center computer. That line hit harder than the affair itself. Claire never ran toward love. She ran toward survival. Ryan probably sold her some fantasy about leaving Chicago behind with hidden money and a fresh start somewhere coastal. People in panic always confuse adrenaline for destiny. I opened another synced message thread from Claire's cloud backup and started scrolling backward through deleted texts recovered by Dean's software tools. Most conversations revolved around secrecy, timing, and financial pressure. Then one message froze me completely. Ryan. Once Ethan signs the post-sale property release, everything clears. Claire, he will sign. He trusts me. My heartbeat slowed into something cold and sharp. 3 weeks earlier, Claire pushed hard for me to refinance a commercial property under the excuse of simplifying taxes. She even scheduled dinner afterward like she was rewarding cooperation. At the time, I delayed the signing because one zoning permit remained unresolved. That delay may have saved me millions. Dean spoke again before I answered. Ethan, there is one more thing. His tone changed. Lower. Heavier. Ryan Mercer boarded a private charter this morning under a false passenger manifest. Your wife boarded with him. I stared at the screen while my mind recalculated the entire battlefield. Then Dean finished the sentence that shifted everything. The Federal Bureau of Investigation already knows where that plane landed. People think betrayal explodes in one giant moment. Truth works differently. Truth keeps unfolding long after your stomach goes numb. I spent the next 2 hours inside my office reviewing every financial connection between Claire and Ryan, while federal agents probably watched the same trail from another building somewhere. Strange feeling, realizing your marriage collapsed inside a larger investigation. Claire thought she escaped into romance. She actually stepped into an evidence file. Dean sent another encrypted folder just after 3 o'clock. Internal Atlas Media Link emails, executive communications, compliance memos. One thread carried Ryan Mercer's name across 14 pages, tied to unauthorized retention payouts and falsified consultant invoices. Claire appeared repeatedly as secondary approval support on several transactions. She probably signed forms without reading them closely. Ryan likely framed everything as executive procedure. People in affairs always recruit each other into bad decisions because shared guilt feels intimate. I called Susan again and forwarded the documents directly into attorney-client archive storage. This changes your exposure completely, she said after reviewing the first batch. Claire moved from unfaithful spouse territory into potential financial liability. Can she claim ignorance? I asked. Susan exhaled slowly, maybe emotionally. Legally gets harder once signatures and transfers appear. I stared at Claire's digital signature stamped beneath a reimbursement approval dated 5 weeks earlier. The amount totaled $48,000 routed through a Cayman intermediary company tied to Ryan's shell vendors. My wife spent years lecturing me about ethics whenever contractors offered shortcuts on permits or labor compliance. Now her signature sat beneath offshore money movements connected to a federal fraud inquiry. Life gets cynical fast once masks start falling. Around 4:30, Claire texted again. Dinner overlooking the water tonight. You would love this place. Attached photo. White tablecloth. Ocean view. Expensive wine. Ryan's watch barely visible beside her hand at the edge of the frame. She still performed marriage while sleeping inside another reality. That level of compartmentalization fascinated me more than the affair itself. Human beings survive guilt by splitting themselves into versions. Claire built one version for me and another for Ryan. Problem was, both versions started colliding under pressure. I opened the smart banking alerts tied to our joint finances and spotted a fresh notification. Claire attempted a $25,000 transfer from our savings into her private First Horizon account 30 minutes earlier. Transaction denied. She forgot I changed authorization rules that morning. There it was. Panic moving beneath the surface now. Affairs become survival operations once money starts shaking. I sent Susan the attempted transfer notice immediately. Excellent, she replied. Pattern escalation. Keep records clean and stay silent. Silence. That part came easier than expected. Pain burns hot at first, then something colder takes over. Precision. I walked upstairs afterward and entered our bedroom slowly. Claire's side looked stripped already. Missing jewelry tray. Missing passport folder. Half her closet emptied weeks earlier without me fully registering it. Looking back, she had been leaving in pieces for months. One hanger at a time. One secret account at a time. One lie at a time. I opened the bottom drawer of her dresser searching for additional financial records and found something stranger instead. A spiral notebook. Cheap black cover. Claire's handwriting filled every page. Dates. Numbers. Property values. Estimated equity calculations tied to my commercial buildings. Handwritten notes beside each asset. Likely marital. Possible leverage. Push refinance before sale. My chest tightened harder with every page. This was never spontaneous. Claire studied my holdings like preparation for an extraction plan. Then I reached the final page and froze completely. One sentence sat alone across the paper in dark ink. Once Ethan signs the waterfront development papers, Ryan says we can disappear for good. My phone rang before I could process the words. Dean Holloway again. This time his voice carried urgency sharp enough to cut through steel. Ethan, he said, federal agents just detained Ryan Mercer at a private marina in Miami. He paused 1 second. Your wife ran before they reached the dock. Claire vanished for almost 19 hours after federal agents grabbed Ryan Mercer at the marina. No calls. No texts. Her social accounts went dark one by one like someone shutting lights inside a collapsing building. Dean tracked movement through airport security logs and financial activity tied to her remaining cards. She avoided hotels connected to loyalty programs. Smart move. Panic sharpens people fast. Unfortunately for Claire, desperation leaves cleaner trails than comfort. Around midnight, one of her backup credit cards triggered a charge at a pharmacy outside Fort Lauderdale. $37.12. Burner phone. Toothbrush. Prepaid charger. Dean forwarded the receipt while I sat at my kitchen counter reviewing divorce filings Susan finalized that afternoon. Strange thing about endings. Once paperwork enters the room, emotion starts losing oxygen. Marriage turns into signatures, disclosures, asset schedules, and documented timelines. Claire spent months preparing escape routes through hidden accounts and emotional manipulation. I spent one day building legal walls around everything she thought she could take. Susan structured the filing aggressively but clean. Temporary financial restraints. Immediate asset freeze requests tied to suspicious transfer activity. Protection clauses surrounding my business holdings and commercial developments. Every document carried supporting evidence attached in indexed order. Judges appreciate organization more than drama. Around 1 a.m, my phone finally lit up with Claire's name. I stared at it a while before answering. Her breathing hit first. Fast. Uneven. Ethan, she whispered. Something happened. I almost laughed at the simplicity of that sentence. Affairs always feel glamorous until consequences start asking questions. Where are you? I asked calmly. Silence stretched across the line before she answered. I need help. There it was. Same woman who spent months planning my replacement, suddenly reaching back toward stability like a drowning. Swimmer spotting shore. Federal agents arrested Ryan, she said quickly. He lied to me about everything. I leaned back in my chair and watched the reflection of our dark dining room window while she unraveled. Claire, I said quietly, you forged financial approvals tied to offshore accounts. Her breathing stopped for half a second. You knew? I know more than you think. Another silence. Heavy this time. Fear entered fully now. Ryan said those transfers were legal executive incentives. She rushed out. He said the company targeted him because of internal politics. People under pressure always confess sideways. They wrap truth inside excuses, hoping language softens reality. You open hidden accounts, I answered. You tracked my property values in notebooks. You pushed refinancing paperwork tied to my waterfront development. Her voice cracked slightly. I was scared. No, I said. You were planning. That line landed hard enough to pull tears into her breathing. I heard them immediately. The strange part? I felt almost nothing. Anger burned out somewhere between the hotel photo and the federal investigation. What remained felt colder. Clarity, maybe. Claire started talking faster after that. Ryan promised they would relocate after liquidating several investment positions. He told her my commercial sale proceeds would create clean startup money once I signed revised ownership documents. She believed him because affairs thrive on fantasy economics. New city, new life, new identity, same broken people underneath. I never wanted this, she whispered. You wanted freedom, I answered evenly. Freedom costs things. She cried openly then. Real panic now. Real consequences. Please do not destroy me over this, she said. I will cooperate. I will tell the truth. I closed my eyes briefly while her words echoed through the kitchen. Cooperate. Interesting word choice. She finally understood the game, changed from marriage collapse into legal survival. Then she said something that shifted the entire situation again. Ethan, there is one more problem. My grip tightened around the phone. What problem? Her breathing shook harder before she answered. Ryan, moved money through one of your companies using forged authorization documents. The room went completely still after Claire said forged authorization documents. Every contractor, developer, and business owner understands one thing deep in their bones. Reputation builds slower than concrete dries and collapses faster than glass. I stood up immediately and walked back into my office while Claire kept breathing hard through the phone like she finally understood the size of the fire around her. Explain carefully, I said. My voice sounded calm enough to scare even me. She swallowed audibly before speaking. Ryan told me your company accounts moved money all the time between development projects. He said temporary transfers would disappear once the waterfront deal closed. I opened my corporate banking dashboard and started reviewing archived transaction activity from the last 90 days. What exactly did you sign? I asked. Some approval forms. Vendor releases. A temporary consulting authorization. There it was. Layered fraud always hides inside boring paperwork because people skim what looks administrative. I logged into the holding company tied to my waterfront project and immediately spotted 3 transactions flagged earlier by internal compliance software. At the time, my accounting team assumed clerical duplication during a subcontractor rebidding phase. Now the numbers look different. 40,000, 68,000, 92,000, routed through consulting vendors tied to Atlas MediaLink shell entities. Ryan threaded corporate fraud through my business infrastructure like a parasite hiding inside healthy tissue. Claire, I asked quietly, did you ever see my signature on those forms? Silence answered first. Then came the truth. Ryan used digital templates. My jaw tightened. Forgery upgrades a scandal into a federal conversation very fast. I exported every transaction instantly and forwarded them into secure legal storage while Susan joined a 3-way conference call from her home office. 20 minutes later, she sounded fully awake and dangerous. This changes your position dramatically, she said after reviewing the files. You moved from collateral spouse into direct victim exposure. Claire started crying again. Raw panic this time. I never wanted to hurt Ethan financially. Susan cut through her instantly. Intent matters less than signatures and transfer chains. Lawyers talk like surgeons when situations turn serious. Clean, precise, ruthless. I kept reviewing transaction metadata while Claire explained how Ryan manipulated the narrative for months. He framed me as emotionally distant, called my caution around contracts control issues, told Claire wealthy men always hide money from wives before divorce. Classic psychological setup. Turn the husband into the villain so the affair feels morally justified. Ryan sold fantasy mixed with fear until Claire started helping him dismantle her own life. He said once we accessed the waterfront liquidity, we could relocate before Atlas froze anything. she whispered. Susan almost laughed under her breath. Federal investigators freeze interstate transfers within hours once financial fraud escalates. Claire went quiet again. Reality finally reached her. The strange thing? I felt more exhausted than angry now. 14 years collapsed into spreadsheets, fake signatures, burner phones, and offshore transfers. Marriage stripped down to transaction logs. I opened the forged authorization packet Claire mentioned and stared at the digital signature attached beside mine. Ryan copied my signature almost perfectly except for one detail. I always slant the final stroke upward on legal documents because my father taught me years ago that signatures reveal pressure points. Ryan missed that detail entirely. Small mistake. Fatal mistake. Susan, I said, forensic review will clear me fast. Very fast, she answered. Especially once federal agents compare signature pressure analysis. Claire suddenly inhaled sharply on the line. Wait. Fear returned hard enough to shake her voice. Ryan kept originals. Originals of what? I asked. Her answer landed like ice water straight through my chest. The fake authorization packets. He stored everything inside a lockbox under your company name. Then she said the sentence that changed the entire power balance again. And I know exactly where he hid it. Claire finally agreed to meet 43 hours after federal agents detained Ryan Mercer. She picked a private marina cafe outside Naples because people running from consequences always choose places with water nearby. Something about the ocean makes guilty people believe escape still exists. I arrived 10 minutes early with Susan Keller and Dean Holloway seated separately inside the building where they could watch without entering the conversation. Claire stepped onto the patio wearing oversized sunglasses and the same white sweater she used during our anniversary trip to Charleston 3 years earlier. Strange detail to notice in a collapsing marriage, but betrayal sharpens memory in weird ways. She looked exhausted now. Makeup rushed. Hair tied back loose. Every movement carried tension like her nervous system stopped trusting the ground beneath it. She sat across from me and pushed a manila envelope across the table before speaking. Everything Ryan kept copies of is listed there, she whispered. I opened the envelope slowly. Storage unit receipts. Bank access logs. 2 lockbox registration numbers tied to shell companies under fake consulting entities. Claire spent months helping Ryan hide financial trails and now handed me the map back piece by piece. Federal agents already searched his condo, she said. They missed the secondary records. Why tell me now? I asked calmly. Her eyes lowered toward the table. Because Ryan planned to bury everything under your companies if things collapsed. There it was again. The real story underneath the affair. Ryan never loved Claire. He used her proximity to my businesses like a bridge into protected commercial capital. Affairs built on fantasy always reveal transactions underneath eventually. Claire opened her purse with shaking hands and removed a second folder smaller than the first. These are the original signature templates, she said quietly. I flipped through them one by one. High-resolution scans of my business signatures copied from permit filings, loan renewals, and development agreements. Ryan built an entire fraud architecture around digital duplication, and Claire helped feed him access. She watched my office routines, learned my filing habits, identified which documents passed through automated review. Marriage gives people terrifying levels of access once trust turns automatic. He said wealthy men always protect themselves before divorce, Claire whispered. He convinced me you already planned to replace me. I almost smiled hearing that. Ryan manipulated her using the oldest strategy in existence. Feed insecurity until loyalty collapses from inside. You made choices long before Ryan entered the picture, I answered evenly. Tears formed immediately in her eyes. Real tears this time. Shame carries a different texture than fear. Fear shakes people. Shame hollows them out. I know, she said softly. I kept telling myself you stopped seeing me. So you studied my assets instead? That landed hard enough to silence her completely. I leaned back and studied the woman I married 14 years earlier. Same green eyes. Same voice. Entirely different person sitting across from me now. Claire reached into her purse one final time and placed a small silver key beside the coffee cup between us. Storage unit 78, she said. Ryan hid physical drives there along with offshore account records. Dean texted me immediately from inside the cafe after seeing the exchange through the glass. Move fast. Federal vehicles entered the parking lot. I looked up toward the marina entrance and saw two dark SUVs turning slowly past the dock. Claire noticed them too. Panic flooded her face instantly. "Ethan," she whispered. "I never meant for this to become criminal." I stood calmly and slid the silver key into my jacket pocket. Intent stopped maturing days ago. Then I started walking toward the parking lot, while federal agents stepped out of the SUVs carrying folders thick enough to end careers. Halfway to my truck, my phone buzzed with a message from Susan. One sentence only. "You need to see what was inside the storage unit before the agents do." I reached the storage facility 22 minutes before federal agents secured the property. Dean already waited beside Unit 78 wearing jeans, a navy windbreaker, and the same unreadable expression he carried the first day we met. He unlocked the roll-up door, while Susan stayed on speakerphone guiding every move like a battlefield attorney. "Document everything before touching it," she ordered. Dean lifted his phone and started recording immediately. The unit looked ordinary at first glance. Metal shelves, plastic bins, filing boxes stacked with contractor labels Ryan probably bought from an office supply store, hoping organization would disguise fraud. Then Dean opened the first container, and everything changed. Hard drives, passport copies, corporate seals, signature templates, offshore banking tokens. Ryan built an escape kit piece by piece like he planned to vanish long before federal agents entered the story. I moved toward a black fireproof case sitting alone near the back wall, and froze the second I opened it. Inside sat original development contracts from my waterfront project alongside forged amendments carrying my duplicated signature. Ryan prepared documents transferring partial liquidity rights into a shell corporation registered through Belize 6 weeks earlier. The corporation listed Claire Walker as secondary beneficiary. My chest tightened once before settling back into cold focus. She really believed they were building a future together. In reality, Ryan built himself a parachute using my company as fabric. Dean removed another folder and handed it over carefully. "You need to read this." Internal Atlas Media Link Communications filled the pages. Executives discussing Ryan Mercer privately. Compliance concerns. Financial discrepancies. Behavioral instability. One sentence stood out above all the others. Subject believes he can access external real estate liquidity through spousal relationship. I stared at those words a while. Spousal relationship. That was all Claire became inside Ryan's real plan. Access. A pathway. A tool. Affair self-fantasy up front and reveal utility later. Susan interrupted my thoughts through the speakerphone. "Federal vehicles entered the property 2 minutes ago. Ethan, secure copies and leave originals untouched." Dean photographed every page while I copied relevant files onto an encrypted drive Susan prepared earlier. Then I saw the final item hidden beneath the false bottom of the fireproof case. A handwritten letter from Ryan addressed directly to Claire. I opened it slowly. The first lines explained everything. Ryan admitted he targeted her intentionally after learning details about my developments through casual dinner conversations at company events. He described me as predictable, overworked, and easy to emotionally isolate. Every compliment he fed Claire. Every romantic promise. Every future fantasy. Strategy from the beginning. Then came the sentence that hollowed the room completely. "Once Ethan signs the final waterfront release, we disappear before he understands what happened." I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope while federal agents approached the storage unit entrance outside. Dean lowered the door halfway before they reached us. "Time to go," he muttered. By the time I returned home that night, the divorce filing already hit the court system electronically. Asset protections locked into place. Fraud evidence transferred into federal custody. Claire texted 3 times while I reviewed the final paperwork alone in my kitchen. First message, "Ryan lied to me." Second message, "I ruined everything." Third message arrived 11 minutes later. "Please tell me there is still a way to fix this." I stared at the screen without answering. 14 years together. 1 week apart. Entire lives destroyed in between. Then I walked upstairs, removed our wedding photo from the bedroom wall, and placed it face down inside a moving box beside the closet. Strange thing about betrayal. People assume the deepest pain comes from losing someone you loved. Truth cuts differently. The deepest pain comes from realizing the person you loved started disappearing long before you noticed. Around midnight, Susan called one final time with an update from federal investigators. Ryan Mercer agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentencing exposure. And Claire? I asked quietly. Susan paused before answering. That depends on whether she tells the truth before he tells his version first. I looked out across the dark water. Behind the house Claire once begged me to buy, and finally understood something simple enough to last forever. Some people ask for freedom because they think freedom means escape. Real freedom costs accountability. And once truth enters the room, somebody always pays the bill.